So let me get back to, I'll be there in a second, April. This morning, the president dropped by the National Governors Association meeting where 49 governors from both states and territories joined cabinet members and senior White House staff to discuss where they can work together to rebuild the country and restart the economy. While at the meeting, the president delivered a statement on his forthcoming budget proposal, which he'll submit to March 16th, as you just heard the director mention. The president's budget will first and foremost keep Americans safe. That means investing in both our nation's physical and financial security. We will rebuild the nation's military. An increase in defense spending, including increased funding for our veterans and our border, will be matched by equal reductions in non-defense programs. The savings in our budget will come from looking at outdated and duplicative programs. The reductions spending will be sensible and rational, but they will also be tough. With our nation's debt spiraling out of control, we simply must take a look at the way we're spending taxpayers' dollars. Families across the country are being forced to make difficult choices because for too long the federal government has not treated their money with the respect they deserve. The national debt exploded under the last administration from $10.6 billion on January 20th, 2009 to $19.9 trillion the day before, sorry, those are both trillions, the day before the President Trump's inaugural. Every child born in America this year will inherit an average of over $60,000 in debt, and that, frankly, is too much. Our budget will restore respect for taxpayers' dollars while funding all of the necessary programs to keep our country safe and prospering. This meeting with the governors was a continuation of a weekend of engagement and discussion between the governors and the administration. The President and the First Lady welcomed the governors last night to the White House for the annual Governor's Ball, and yesterday the Vice President had a very productive meeting with several governors. The administration is proud to be working with the governors on rebuilding our nation's infrastructure, reforming our health care system, and putting Americans back to work. I know that Obamacare in particular was put into place without a lot of input from governors. We're committed to consulting and including them on this and so many other subjects as we solve the nation's biggest issues together. Later this morning, the President had a listening session with some of our country's leading healthcare insurance companies. Interestingly, on yesterday's ABC This Week, Minority Leader Pelosi actually laid out a great outline of how to judge Obamacare's success based on what it was supposed to achieve. She said, quote, it had three goals. One, to lower the cost, the other, to expand benefits, and the third, to improve and increase access. So let's go through her criteria. Lowering costs. Well, this year, all four tiers of Obamacare insurance plans are facing double-digit increases in average premiums. Just to take a look at one set of premiums, for standard silver plans in the states, 63% increase in Tennessee, 69% increase in Oklahoma, and a staggering 116% increase in Arizona. On expanding benefits, in reality, the new law's mandates have led to mass cancellations of coverage, soaring out-of-pocket costs, and declining enrollment figures. Millions are choosing to pay a tax over buying the government-mandated insurance. Increased access. With insurance fleeing the marketplace, Americans are facing a dwindling number of insurance choices, with 17% of Americans left with only one insurer option available in their exchange. Insurers will be indispensable partners in the transition period out of Obamacare into the Patients First plan the President will be working with Congress to put in its place. The President's plan will encourage innovation, modernize our healthcare system, and provide immediate relief and ensure access to quality, truly affordable care. This afternoon, the President had lunch with Vice President Pence and Ambassador Haley. Afterwards, he's having a meeting with Speaker Ryan and Majority Leader McConnell. And then following that, he's going to be meeting with Secretary of State Tillerson. The Secretary is coming off a very successful trip to Mexico that he was joined by Secretary of Homeland Security Kelly. I'm sure the President's looking forward to discussing that trip with the Secretary. Also this afternoon, the Vice President will be speaking to an extraordinary group of 60 presidents of historically black colleges and universities. There will be a pool spray at the top of the event, and the Vice President's office will release his remarks and photos following the event. We can also expect a meeting with the President with them as well. This evening, the President will have dinner with regional press affiliates that are going to be in town for the joint session of Congress. While it's tradition for representatives from the networks to meet with the President before his joint address, this is the first time, to my knowledge at least, that the opportunity has been expanded to include representation from 18 regional outlets from around the country. Tomorrow, the President will also have the traditional lunch with the network anchors. Beyond the so-called Big Five networks, we've also opened it up and invited outlets including Telemundo, Univision, CBN, EWTN, OANN, PBS, C-SPAN, and TV One. Tonight, the President looks forward to seeing his nominee for the Secretary of Commerce, Wilbur Ross, confirmed by the Senate. Secretary-designate Ross has been an important champion for U.S. struggling industries in the private sectors, and pending his confirmation this evening, he will now do in the same post on behalf of the American people what he has done in private sector. Assuming everything goes according to the plan in the Senate tonight, we expect to have his swearing in tomorrow here at the White House. Also tomorrow, the President will deliver his first address to both houses of Congress. In his speech, the President will lay out an optimistic vision for the country, crossing traditional lines of party, race, and socioeconomic status. As I said before, the theme will be the renewal of the American spirit. He will invite Americans of all backgrounds to come together in the service of a stronger and brighter future for our nation. In addition to laying out the concrete steps the President has already taken to make the American dream possible for all of our people, he will talk about the bold agenda he wants to work with Congress. This includes tax and regulatory reform to provide relief to hardworking Americans and their businesses, making the workplace better for working parents, ensuring the families who have suffered under Obamacare's skyrocketing rates see it replaced with a patient-centered alternative, making sure every child in America has access to a good education, a rebuilding of our military, and fulfilling of our commitments to veterans to whom we obviously owe a great deal of gratitude. You can expect a speech grounded firmly in solving real problems for every American. How can we make sure that every American who needs a better job get one? How can we get kids who are trapped in failing schools into better ones? How we can keep gangs and drug violence out of our neighborhoods and communities? The President will address the Americans who have been waiting for help from their leaders for too long and let them know that help is finally on the way. With respect to the speech, we will be having a background briefing sometime this evening here in the briefing room. We will provide additional details later in the afternoon. As you might already know, the Department of Defense presented its preliminary plan to the White House today to defeat ISIS. This plan has been delivered by Secretary Mattis, and who is currently briefing the principals on the option presented with today and seeking their input and feedback. Finally, I wanted to note the President continues to be deeply disappointed and concerned by the reports of further vandalism at Jewish cemeteries. The cowardly destruction in Philadelphia this weekend comes on top of similar accounts from Missouri and threats made to Jewish community centers around the country. The President continues to condemn these and any other form of anti-Semitic and hateful acts in the strongest terms. From our country's founding, we've been dedicated to protecting the freedom of our citizens' rights to worship. No one in America should feel afraid to follow the religion of their choosing freely and openly. The President is dedicated to preserving this originating principle of our nation. And while we're at it, I don't want to get ahead of the law enforcement, but I was asked the other day about the story in Kansas, the shooting in Kansas. And while the story is evolving, early reports out of Kansas are equally disturbing. So with that, I'd be glad to take your questions. John.
Sean, there's a report this morning that you reached out directly to the CIA Director Pompeo. Did you directly contact Director Pompeo and ask him to knock down the New York Times story on the Russia connection?
Thanks, John. Let me, kind of, if I may, walk through the entire timeline. I think it's important. As I mentioned, I think a week ago, the New York Times published a story about what they called contacts between members of the Trump campaign and Russian officials. The FBI deputy director was at a meeting here at the White House that morning. After the meeting concluded, he asked the chief of staff to stand back a second. He wanted to tell him that the report in the New York Times was, quote, BS. For viewers at home, I think you can pretty much figure what that means, but I'll leave it at that. At that time, the chief of staff said, thank you for sharing that with me. Can we let other people know that the story is not accurate? Throughout the day, they went back and forth to see what they thought was appropriate. Finally came to the conclusion that they did not want to get in the process of knocking down every story that they had issues with. We then were informed that other people had come to the same conclusions, including that time Chairman Devin Nunes had told us, hey, I've been knocking this down, telling reporters. We shared a number with him of a reporter that had contacted us. And again, when the reporters contacted us and we said, no, that's not, to the best of our knowledge, it's not true, they were asking us, can you point to anybody else that can substantiate this? And I think we did a good job of saying, sure, we will share with reporters other people who have come to the same conclusion. So I won't go into the specifics. I will say that I think we did our job very effectively by making sure that reporters who had questions about the accuracy and the claims made in the New York Times, that we were pointing them to subject matter experts who understood whether or not that story was accurate or not. And I think just to continue to be very, very clear on this, it was about the accuracy of the reporting and the claims that were made in there. Plain and simple, about whether or not a story that appeared in the New York Times was accurate. And individual after individual continued to say that they, as far as they knew, they weren't. I think most of you probably saw Chairman Nunes's comments this morning. He was very clear, number one, that he reached out to us to say, I've been telling people, reporters, that these allegations and descriptions in the New York Times are not accurate. And then we shared that information with him, but he came to us to share that he equally had that issue brought up to him. He was briefed and saw, quote, no evidence that the story was accurate. So the answer is, we have continued to give reporters information and sources that went to the accuracy or lack thereof of a report that was in a newspaper. And I think, I think Chairman Nunes also equally said it's interesting how we literally were engaging with the press, saying, if you have a question about the sourcing on this, obviously when brought to our attention, we said it's not accurate as far as we know. But then most of you and your colleagues who had inquired would say, well, that's great, I'm sure you're saying this, but who else can corroborate this? So our job was to continue to, when informed, share sources who had equally come to the same conclusion that the Times story was not accurate.
You don't think there's something strange about, or something odd about the White House press secretary getting the CIA director on the phone to knock down a story about an investigation?
No, but see, respectfully, you're using words like knock down. There was a story in a newspaper. Hold on. No. There was reporters coming to us saying there is a story out there. What's your take on it? And our answer was, we don't believe it's accurate. We don't believe it's false. But obviously, that's our take on it. And reporters were saying to us, well, is there anybody that you can point to substantiate this claim? Now, remember, this all started with the FBI coming to us, bringing it to our attention, saying that the story in the Times was not accurate. In fact, it was BS. And all we did was simply say, that's great. Could you tell other reporters the same thing you're telling us? And I would think that other reporters, yourself included, would think that that would be a helpful thing to get the story straight. All we sought to do was to actually get an accurate report out. And again, I think Chairman Nunes this morning, over and over and over and over again, made it very clear that no evidence that has been brought to his attention suggested that reporting was accurate. So, respectfully, I think it's interesting that I'm being asked what's appropriate when what we're doing is actually urging reporters to engage with subject matter experts who can corroborate whether or not something's accurate or not.
Should there be a special prosecutor? Darrell Issa has called for a special prosecutor to look into this.
Right, and I guess my question would be a special prosecutor for what?
Look into the whole Russia connection.
And here's my right, and I guess
he was part of the campaign. Sessions was part of the campaign.
I understand, but here's my question, Jonathan. We have now for 6 months heard story after story come out about unnamed sources say the same thing over and over again, and nothing's come of it. Right? We've heard the same people, the same anecdotes, and we've heard reports over and over again. And as Chairman Nunes very, very clear today, he has seen nothing that corroborates that. So at what point you've got to ask yourself, what are you investigating?
Well, Russian interference. Beyond
no, and I think that both the House and the Senate have looked at it. You know as well as I do that the intelligence community has looked at it as well. There's a big difference. I think that Russia's involvement and activity has been investigated up and down. So the question becomes at some point, if there's nothing to further investigate, what are you asking people to investigate? Chairman Nunes spoke very clearly today when asked over and over and over again about all of this and said that he has seen nothing that leads him to believe that there's there. The president has spoken forcefully time and time again that he has no interest in Russia. He hasn't talked to people in Russia in years. And yet you keep asking, and I say you collectively, to try to find something that seemingly at least the reporting that I'm seeing in different organizations suggests that there's nothing new that's being reported. It's the same stuff over and over again that we've heard for literally 6 months. And so the question becomes at some point, what do you need to further investigate if there is nothing that has come out?
Well, can you now categorically deny there were no contacts between the Russians and anybody on the campaign?
I can't. I guess my question is, I'm not right.
That's what the investigation would look at.
Right, and I guess my point is that you've had the intelligence community look at Russia's involvement in the election. You've had the House and the Senate both do the same. And so what I'm trying to ascertain is at what point, how many people have to say that there's nothing there before you realize there's nothing there? I can't say unequivocally. All I'm saying is the people who've done the investigating about Russia overall and its activities in the United States, specifically now with respect to our election, haven't provided anything that lead me to believe or should leave you to believe. And I continue to see reports coming from different media sources that are saying, when they checked in with law enforcement or intelligence community sources, there's nothing more than has been previously reported over and over again. So at some point, you do have to ask yourself, what are you actually looking for? How many times do you have to come to the same conclusion before you take the answer? And that's what Mara?
Sean, just to be clear, just to follow up on that,
Yeah.
did you personally reach out to Pompeo?
I'm not going to discuss what we did internally. I'm just going to say that when we shared, we did our job about making sure that when reporters had questions, we let them know what subject matter experts were available to discuss the accuracy of a news. Major.
Sean, one investigation question, one budget question. As you may be aware, Bill Owens, father employee Ryan Owens, gave an interview with Miami Herald over the weekend, and he said, quote, "The government owes my son an investigation. On behalf of the President of the United States, is the President open to an investigation of the raid in Yemen?" And the father of Ryan Owens called that a stupid mission. Is there something that you'd like to communicate to him about that mission that might persuade him otherwise?
Yeah, thank you. That's multi-part, so let me kind of walk through it slowly. First of all, I can't possibly imagine what he's going through in terms of the loss of a son. I can tell him that on behalf of the President, his son died a hero, and the information that he was able to help obtain through that raid, as I've said before, was going to save American lives. It's going to protect our country more. So he made a sacrifice for this country. He was on his 12th deployment. And I know that his wife, when she spoke to the President, knows that he did this because he loved it. He cared about our nation. And the mission was successful in helping prevent a future attack or attacks on this nation. It obtained a lot of information that will help us keep safe. With respect to his request, it is standard operating procedure for the Department of Defense to undergo what they call a 15-6 review. That review, in this case, is three-pronged. Because there was a fatality and the loss of life, there's that. Because there was civilians involved, that's another. And then third is because there was hardware, a helicopter that was damaged. That is a separate. So, in fact, there will be 3 reviews done by the Department of Defense because of the nature of this. But again, I can't stress enough that on behalf of the President, on behalf of this nation, we express our condolences, extend our prayers to him during this time. And
As you said, that is